The CID rendezvous point was located in a building on the outskirts of the city. Removed from the area of the fiercest fighting, the location made a suitable meeting place. Not because the building wouldn't draw much attention, as the city fell into ruin. Few structures stood out anymore, not even the ones in the city's center. But because the constant threat of cluster bombings within the city proper tended to put a damper on long conversations. Drebin's M4 at the ready, Snake stepped inside. Sunlight filtered through the cloth roof of the courtyard at the core of the 5-story building. Any trace of life had long since gone. I told Snake that the meeting point was on the top floor, and he started up a staircase decorated with colorful arabesque tilework. Snake climbed one flight of steps, then another. He gritted his teeth, and I knew his ankles, his knees, his hips, all of his joints were crying out in agony. Snake was beset by old age and all its maladies, including osteoarthritis, arteriosclerosis, aortic stenosis, and a slowed healing process. Normally, a person has decades to adjust to the gradual deterioration of the human body with age. Snake had to confront it over a period of years. Muscle suit or no muscle suit, 5 flights of stairs were no easy feat for the body of a 70-year-old. I suggested he take a break, but he ignored me. With great effort, he made it to the top and exited to the roof. I bit my lip. Snake was fighting a battle between his body and the world, and there was nothing I could do to help him. Once out in the open air, we saw that this was only half the roof. Another partial floor occupied the remaining space. Taking care to walk silently on the balls of his feet, Snake stepped inside and into a room littered with empty bottles of liquor, formerly a bar. Snake passed through and saw his destination. His rifle trained in front of him, Snake carefully pushed open the door to the room. Thankfully, the hinges were mostly free of rust, and no squeak broke the quiet. Through the crack in the doorway, Snake peered into the room. It was empty. Just as he set foot inside, Snake sensed someone behind him and turned. From behind the doorway stepped a soldier, armed and with a gun pointed at Snake's head. "Drop your weapon!" The soldier's voice sounded young. Snake glimpsed the man's weapon out of the corner of his eye. It was trembling. He was reminded of an incident on Shadow Moses. It was just like when Snake had first met Meryl. She resisted alone against the rebel Foxhound unit. Maybe she was trying to live up to the memory of the man she believed to be her father, the Gulf War hero. When she saw Snake, she didn't know if he were friend or foe, and she'd held a trembling FAMAS at his head just as this man was doing now. Snake dropped his operator, raised his hands, and turned to face the soldier. "Don't move!" The man's voice was as shaky as his gun. Snake couldn't help but grin. This really was just like before. "You haven't even taken the safety off, rookie." "Careful! I'm no rookie! I'm a 10-year vet!" Snake deliberately flicked his eyes to the safety on the soldier's XM8. Lacking the confidence to see through Snake's bluff, the young man nervously glanced at the side of his rifle. The safety was off, but he didn't have time to bask in satisfaction. By then, the veteran Snake had already made the young man pay the price for letting his guard down. Snake grabbed the M8 and yanked the rifle forward. The young soldier lost balance, and Snake connected his elbow to the man's face. He hooked his leg around that of the soldier, and still gripping the rifle, sent him flying to the ground. CQC, short for Close Quarters Combat, was the hand-to-hand fighting style developed during the Cold War by the boss and her disciple, Naked Snake, aka Big Boss. Snake had mastered it. Not 1 second after he had dropped his guard, the soldier was staring up the barrel of his own rifle. This was a 10-year veteran? How the hell did he ever survive that long? "Don't move!" Now another gun was at Snake's head. Snake's eyes moved to the ridiculously large barrel of the gun to find, with no surprise, a Desert Eagle. The weapon was tremendously powerful for a handgun, but if a weaker female had attempted to fire it one-handed, the recoil would probably snap the bones in her wrist. But the voice that now spoke to him was definitely that of a woman. "CQC, a real big boss, huh?" Snake kept the XM8 pointed at the soldier on the ground as he eyed the woman with the Desert Eagle. She wore a balaclava, which hid all of her face except for her eyes. "Lower your weapon!" she ordered. "Slowly now. I wouldn't try anything funny if I were you." Snake noticed that there was more pointed at him than this woman's particular choice of firearm, 2 laser dots held steadily on his chest. Judging from the gear worn by the woman and the younger soldier, the 2 were likely in the CID Special Ops Unit. No matter where the battlefield, Americans stood out. Then Snake noticed the emblem sewn onto the woman's combat chest harness, a sharp-eyed fox holding a combat knife in its mouth.
"Foxhound?"
Snake said. The woman's eyes narrowed in suspicion, but soon a look of surprise washed over her.
"Snake?"
She lowered her weapon and pulled off her mask, revealing a familiar face. She had grown up since Shadow Moses, and no youthfulness remained in her appearance. Only her chic hairstyle was unchanged. Meryl Silverberg, Colonel Campbell's so-called niece, who had fought alongside Snake on Shadow Moses Island.
"It's been 4 days,"
Meryl said,
"since Liquid arrived in the area."
He squinted and moved the glossy paper closer and further from his eyes, trying to find the sweet spot where the photo wouldn't be blurry. Meryl looked away. I wasn't surprised she hadn't recognized him at first. The aging had been so fast and severe, he looked like a different person than he had only years before. When he told her about the disease, she couldn't hide her shock. Since she was little, she'd fondly listened to stories of the legendary man, and when she'd met him on Shadow Moses, her feelings toward him grew. Now, seeing the unthinkable transformation of the man she'd once fallen for, she seemed truly disturbed. Though Snake could understand her feelings, he also knew there was nothing he could do about them. What surprised him most was that beyond the initial and short-lived shock, she was handling the news so well. She seemed unnaturally calm. The picture was of a man once known as Revolver Ocelot. An agent of the Patriots and a former Foxhound member, Ocelot had lost his right arm on Shadow Moses and had the limb replaced with one belonging to the fallen Liquid. Some even thought that Liquid's personality had taken over through the transplanted arm. Meryl gave Snake another photograph. The subject seemed to be a woman, though her face wasn't clear. Not only was she wearing a hood, the picture was out of focus.
"This woman's been with him the whole time. She doesn't seem like a combatant, probably some kind of advisor. Maybe a scientist."
Meryl leaned forward to get a closer look at the picture. Her face was near Snake's now, and close up, the effects of his aging were undeniable. His skin was dry and mottled with blotchy and innumerable wrinkles creasing the corners of his eyes. She could even hear his wheezing breaths. She began to tear up and gently placed a hand on the shoulder of the man she'd once loved, but Snake shrugged her off. He would soon reach the end of his life, but he couldn't endure her pity. He'd hurt enough people already. He tried to soften his rebuff, saying,
"You've become a fine soldier."
But that wasn't what she wanted to hear, not some praise about her abilities as a soldier.
"Maybe it's because someone taught me well. A certain legendary hero who suddenly disappeared."
Snake never did know how to talk to women, despite how talkative he was over the wireless codec. I even grew to think of him as a big mouth.
"You quit the unit,"
she said.
"Me? I never gave up on you, or on Foxhound."
She might have been wearing the emblem of her own accord. I doubt the Army had acknowledged its use, seeing the Foxhound Special Unit was still kept secret.
"Snake, back then, I just wanted you to accept me. I wanted you to turn around and see who I was. But I've put the past behind me. I'm done playing romance."
Meryl regained her composure. Snake looked pained, but just when I thought he might let his emotions come through, his face went blank. Every time his feelings began bubbling up, something seemed to crush them back down.
"Commander!"
This was the soldier who had surprised Snake from behind the door. Without looking at him, Meryl sighed.
"Akiba, what is it? The bathroom again?"
Yes, ma'am. My stomach hurts again."
"Is your stomach ever normal?"
Yes, well, I think so. I'm sure it's been at some time, although I can't remember."
Meryl had heard enough and waved Akiba off, hands clutched to his stomach. He moved as stealthily as he could to reach the toilet in time.
"He's a handful,"
Snake said. Meryl put her hands on her head.
His name's Johnny Sasaki, but everybody just calls him Akiba. He handles traps, sensors, and cyber combat. He has a wearable computer on his right arm.
I've come across a number of soldiers with bad stomachs,
Snake said.
It must just be my luck. Maybe I had some taste for bizarre foods in a fast life, and now I'm doomed to encounter the scatological.
Maybe it's been the same soldier all those times.
Yeah, right.
They both laughed. Then Meryl asked,
So, what are you here for?
Threat assessment. The PMCs.
That was partly true, at least, thought Snake. To discover Liquid's intentions, he would have to discover the threat posed by the PMCs.
Really? Because I hear a rumor there's an assassin out there targeting their leader.
Snake feigned surprise.
Well, that's some rumor. I'm only here because the UN wants me to assess the impact and the effect of PMCs on their refugee protection efforts.
That's all?
More than enough for a retired vet like me.
Meryl sighed and, seeing she wasn't going to get anywhere, returned to the subject at hand.
I know he's plotting an insurrection. But as long as AT security system is in place, there's no way he'll succeed.
How can you be so sure?
They've implemented a system that monitors in real time every single soldier engaged in combat action. Whether he's State Army or PMC, each soldier has been fully ID tagged with nanomachines injected into their bodies for that purpose. The AI system's core not only collects data on the state of their bodies and the battlefield, it also monitors sensory organ data showing strong emotions such as pain and fear. This data is monitored at HQ to enable command to make quicker, more precise, and more rational decisions. It also enables crisis management for each individual soldier.
Battlefield control.
It's been used by the U.S. military, by state armies and allied countries, by PMCs. Even police agencies are starting to adopt it. Unless they agree to implement the system, PMCs aren't permitted to send troops anywhere. Snake made a connection with something strange he'd sensed in Meryl's behavior.
You've got these nanomachines in you too.
Of course. Our unit plays by the rules, same as everybody else. It was creepy at first, knowing you're being watched 24/7. But I've gotten used to it. It gives us a lot of advantages in the field, too. We get a clearer picture of what's going on around us, so there's less confusion during a mission. And our nanomachines communicate with each other, making teamwork a lot smoother.
Snake had sensed right. Her unnatural calm, as if something inside her quelled her rising emotions. Nanomachines. Nanomachines, and their link with the system, constantly scanned her mental state. They found an emotion instability and automatically stabilized her.
And that's not all the system does for us,
Meryl continued.
It's also a security guarantee against the PMCs.
A security guarantee?
The PMCs don't fight out of nationalism or for a cause. They're just bodies, fighting on someone else's behalf. They're mercenaries, a commodity. It's easy to imagine them betraying their clients by joining the enemy or refusing to fight, or committing humanitarian atrocities. To keep these things in check, the system ensures that no one can use firearms or military vehicles without proper system ID. It's true for every piece of equipment out there.
So if the PMCs tried to mount a terrorist attack or coup d'etat...
Meryl cut in.
Right. They would automatically find themselves locked out of their weapons and equipment. They wouldn't be able to move, attack, or engage in combat of any kind.
Snake wasn't convinced.
What if someone tried to circumvent the system by getting the nanomachines out of their bodies?
She chuckled.
They'd be losing their IDs in the process, so they wouldn't be able to use their weapons.
We've progressed too far,
Snake said.
We can do too much now.
The more impossible circumventing the system for Liquid seemed, the more uneasy Snake felt. The system appeared to be perfect, but there had to be something he wasn't seeing. Snake was struck by a suspicion.
And the Patriots are involved?
Lalilule Low? What's Lalilule Low?
Word protection. Her nanomachines were censoring him, interfering with her ability to hear what he said. Snake had seen this before. In the Manhattan incident, he'd run into people under Patriot control who couldn't speak the group's name. When they tried, the word only came out in the gibberish phrase, "la-le-lu-le-lo." Snake sighed.
Never mind. So the system's foolproof, huh?
Completely. They're calling it SOP.
Standard operating procedure.
No, short for Sons of the... It's the network that monitors soldiers.
Sons of the Patriots. Meryl continued.
The AI that controls is a tightly guarded secret, both at Arms Tech Security, where it was developed, and at the Pentagon. There's no way a third party could get control of it.
I just met a man who said he could launder ID guns. The system does have holes.
There can't be more than a few hundred of those gun launderers. They're a grassroots organization. It's not like they can affect the entire PMC war machine.
And Liquid won't be able to make use of his military forces?
Meryl nodded.
His PMCs might even exceed the U.S. military in terms of numbers. But as long as they're registered, their troops' activities are constantly being monitored. As long as the U.S. responds immediately when Liquid makes his move, we can take them down by force.
Snake grinned wryly.
By force, huh? Typical thinking for someone in the U.S. military.
Snake clearly thought, but didn't say. I knew that smile, though. What did he say this was? How did you get involved?
When Army Special Operations Command heard about Liquid's plan, they sent us to sniff around the PMCs. Took us 3 months to find him. When we reported that we'd found Liquid, our superiors ordered us to provide the UN investigators with intel. But I didn't know it'd be you.
Didn't the Colonel tell you he was sending me?
Colonel?
Waves of barely restrained hatred stirred her composed expression.
Don't tell me it's Campbell!
You didn't know?
You've gotta be kidding! You expect me to work with my uncle?
Meryl stood and paced around, kicking chairs, cursing, no longer attempting to hide her anger.
Meryl, calm down. This is bullshit! He's not my father!
Snake was at a loss for words. She knows. She knows whose blood flows through her, whose genes she inherited. Meryl considered her father a curse. Husbands and wives can choose their spouses, but children can't choose their parents. I guess that can be a kind of curse, even though most are lucky enough never to have to think of it that way. But Snake and Meryl weren't lucky. Just as Snake hadn't chosen to be born as Big Boss's clone, she hadn't chosen to be born Campbell's daughter.
So,
said Snake,
you knew.
Yeah. Little violation of the need-to-know rule.
That unnatural calm had returned to her voice. Amid the nearby PMC and rebel gunfire, nothing was a bigger disturbance to a unit than its commander losing herself in a fit of anger. Still, Snake couldn't help but abhor those nanomachines for suppressing her real and valid anger.
Then why are you still calling him Uncle?
Why are you still calling him Colonel?
He's your father.
As far as I'm concerned, we're still uncle and niece. I'll never forgive that womanizing piece of shit.
That was going too far. Snake shook his head.
Meryl,
He remarried.
The Colonel remarried?
Snake reeled in shock, likely chastising himself that now, with life and death and the fate of the world on the line, was not the right time or place for all this small talk of cheating and remarriage. Meryl's subordinate, Johnny, the burly African-American sniper Ed, and the giant Mohawk Jonathan were clearly uncomfortable, doing anything they could, inspecting their weapons and electronics, feigning sleep not to look at the two.
His new wife's about my age, Meryl said. I hear she's even got a kid. It's as if he's given up on making up with his own daughter. Men. Selfish, egotistical pigs.
Snake's expression reflected guilt, as if she were accusing him, which she probably was. He changed the subject.
Where's Liquid now?
Meryl suspiciously eyed the man who was working for the father she hated and said,
Liquid's camp's just up ahead. I'll mark it on your map.
From the skies above the abandoned city, the giant bird-like sliders, part tactical strike bomber, part mobile advertisements, tirelessly blasted out their promotional message. We hope that you'll consider the praying mantis solution for all your future combat needs. Staying out of sight of PMC and militia ground forces was no longer enough for Snake. Now he had to watch the skies. Carefully, he made his way toward the location Meryl gave him. The closer he advanced, the thicker PMC patrols became. Before long, the passing of armored vehicles became frequent. The PMC headquarters must have been larger and more fortified than we'd anticipated. Snake made a few adjustments on his muscle suit and enabled its camouflage. He'd need more than his own stealth to go any further. The Octo-Camo system scanned Snake's surroundings and copied them across its surface. The Octo-Camo couldn't make Snake completely invisible like the Mark II stealth camouflage, but much like an octopus's natural camouflage, the suit could read the surfaces around Snake and perfectly emulate them, providing Snake the edge he needed to stay out of sight. The PMC stronghold was located in what used to be the city's administration complex. The building, a boxy structure surrounded by a sizable wall, looked like about what you'd expect from a government office, a healthy mix of authoritarianism and austerity. Easy to defend and hard to assault, the complex even contained a generously sized parking lot. All in all, the facility was well suited for military purposes. Snake went prone upon the gravel, and his camouflage shifted to blend in. Slowly, he crawled through the open streets like an inchworm. The area outside the base provided no cover, but Snake, utilizing Native American tracking techniques, gave the soldiers nothing to see and nothing to hear. Of course, the Octo-Camo was a major factor of his success, but Snake's sense of the connection of the world around him was even more crucial. He was a part of his surroundings, a part of the world. By closely matching himself in with that baseline, he could be more stealthy than what might seem possible. With his sense attuned to the environment around him, Snake easily got inside the wall. Inside, neat rows of tents and transport vehicles provided better cover than outside the complex. This clearly was a command post. Soldiers busily went about their duties, and compared to the patrols outside, they were far less alert. It was always dark below the lighthouse, Snake knew. The soldiers inside shouted at each other instead of using the wireless, providing a level of background noise sufficient that Snake didn't have to worry about keeping quiet. A canard VTOL craft flew overhead with a thunderous roar. Snake's attention was drawn skyward, and then he saw the lone man standing on the roof. A man with long gray hair. Even with sunglasses on, his face was unmistakable. The man once known as Revolver Ocelot, now known as Liquid Snake. But what should he be called, really? At the Manhattan incident, he'd called himself Liquid. The right arm, transplanted onto another's body, awakened. Was that even possible? There had to be a better explanation. When he confronted Ocelot in the sinking tanker off the coast of Manhattan, Snake had felt Liquid's presence in the man. After the events at Shadow Moses and the spreading of Metal Gear technology throughout the world, Snake and I founded Philanthropy, an anti-Metal Gear organization. We monitored nuclear powers for any sign that they were developing new Metal Gears. After receiving intel that the U.S. Marine Corps was smuggling an anti-Metal Gear, Metal Gear Ray, inside a decoy oil tanker, Snake intercepted and infiltrated the ship in the Hudson Bay. He intended to get photographic evidence of the Metal Gear, which I would then leak to the internet and reveal their secret to the world. We were beaten to the weapon by Russian mercenaries intent on stealing it for themselves. The group was led by Colonel Sergei Gurlukovich, former head of the Spetsnaz GRU and the father of Olga Gurlukovich, making him Sonny's grandfather. Sergei successfully seized the tanker, but lost his life when he was betrayed by a member of his forces. Betrayal might not be the right word, because Ocelot, who'd escaped Shadow Moses and left Foxhound, had only joined Sergei to spy on behalf of the Patriots. That's how our paths crossed with him once more. There, as Ocelot's explosives doomed the ship, Snake saw Ocelot the man cease to exist. Though Ocelot struggled to resist the transplanted right arm, in the end, Liquid took complete control of his body. The man who stole Metal Gear Ray and successfully escaped the sinking vessel wasn't anyone if not Liquid Snake. 2 years later, when the president was kidnapped and we faced Ocelot again, Liquid had taken full control. And the man was both Liquid Snake and Revolver Ocelot. And now that man, unmistakably, stood atop the government building.
I knew it.
Meryl's voice came over Snake's cochlear implant radio. He dropped to one knee and quickly scanned the area for her squad, spotting them within cover in a concealed corner of the complex.
Snake, you're here to kill Liquid, aren't you?
That's the mission. Are you going to stop me?
My mission, Meryl said, is to inspect the PMCs. I'm not in a position to take action. All I can do is stand by and watch.
Whether by her own decision or orders from ARSOC, this was a tacit consent from the U.S. Army.
I can't help you, she said. Understand? I'm a peacekeeper, here to keep order.
Understood.
Snake cut the transmission and gave Meryl a small wave. She hesitated, dropped her eyes for a moment, then motioned her unit to move on. Liquid seemed to be talking over his wireless. He was positioned where he could look down over the courtyard, where his employees, the PMC soldiers, were going about their various duties, transporting equipment and forming ranks. Even Snake would likely not be able to cut through their masses, but he could at least move a little closer where he could better observe Liquid. Snake stood and carefully advanced. Then the world fell apart. His chest felt like it was being crushed, blinking, breathing. Every act of simply staying alive brought an avalanche of pain cascading upon him. He felt that his thoughts and awareness and everything that made up his consciousness was completely shut off from himself. He had only made a single step forward, and from there he could no longer move. Snake's every step told the story.
So this is it. My end has come. Old age has brought an end to my tired life. Is this as far as I go? Is this really it?
Snake struggled to retain his consciousness. He fought against the crumbling world with everything he had. At the edges of his awareness, the other soldiers shared his agony. They were all around him, some convulsing on the ground, others frothing at the mouth, a few shitting themselves uncontrollably, and on and on. Snake looked for Meryl's squad. Ed, Jonathan, and Meryl had collapsed with their hands clutched to their heads. Only Akiba seemed unaffected, helplessly watching his comrades suffer. Snake gritted his teeth.
It's not over. I can't fall here. Not yet, he told himself. I cannot leave my fate, my curse to Meryl and Sonny's generation. After I finish what I must, then I will happily die. But not now. I still must fight.
With a voiceless roar, he lifted his operator and stumbled into the courtyard. He pushed his way through the throngs of writhing and flailing soldiers. He fought against waves of overwhelming nausea. With saliva streaming from his mouth, he closed in on Liquid. Suddenly, Liquid pointed straight at him. Snake froze as if pierced through the courtyard. Liquid gazed down upon the courtyard in chaos and boomed,
Brother! It's been too long! Liquid!
Liquid spread his arms in theatrical motion.
Rejoice! We're not copies of our father, after all.
Snake could no longer focus his vision, and now Liquid appeared as two blurry forms. Snake's heart pounded, the palpitations threatening to burst his hardened arteries. With each beat, pain shot through his heart and his body. Liquid pointed his right arm at the sun.
We are free from the shackles of destiny!
He spoke as if pronouncing his victory over Big Boss, fate, and the world.
Snake! Brother! We are free!
Something within Snake had been defeated. His legs fused to hold up his body. His knees hit the ground, his body submitted to the pain. Liquid was still shouting,
I've surpassed my own creator!
Snake collapsed to the earth. Even when he tried to lift his operator to aim at Liquid, he could no longer distinguish which blurry shape represented the man. Then a pair of feminine legs walked into his vision. The legs moved in steady footsteps, their own apparently not affected by the chaos that struck Snake and the PMC soldiers. One step at a time, the legs approached Snake. The world was silent, same for his own breathing. All seemed distant, dreamlike. A familiar voice cut through the haze.
Snake,
the voice said. Snake realized that he knew her. He had killed her brother, his old comrade. Snake had first crippled him in Zanzibar land and stood by and watched him die on Shadow Moses. He was given the code name Fox, Foxhound's highest honor. He was Big Boss's ally. Gray Fox. Fox's sister took a syringe out of her coat pocket and slowly injected it into her neck. She was Naomi Hunter, the creator of Fox Dye. Snake muttered,
Naomi.
But he couldn't tell if he had actually been able to voice the word or not. His consciousness was slowly fading. Naomi discarded the empty syringe and turned her back.
Snake, if you don't want to be a prisoner of your fate, then go. Fulfill your destiny.
Snake reached out to her, but pain shot through the straining muscles in his arm and chest, and he collapsed again. By the time he could look up, she was gone. On the roof of the building, Liquid was boarding a transport helicopter, with Naomi already seated inside. Liquid removed his sunglasses and looked down at Snake with naked eyes. His face might have belonged to Revolver Ocelot, but the resentment festering within those eyes was all Liquid. Liquid flashed a smile as he got in the aircraft. Snake found his life flashing before his eyes. It's not just a saying, he told me later. It really does happen. In one instant, he saw a complete charity of events in his life. He began to slip beyond the plane of consciousness. The Iraqi heat when he was a Green Beret disabling Scud missiles in the Gulf War. His infiltration of Outer Heaven, his first mission with Foxhound. When he'd grown tired of war and moved to Canada and was forced back into service to respond to the disturbance in Zanzibar land. Shadow Moses, where he first met his brother Liquid, the tanker in the Hudson Bay he boarded on behalf of his anti-Metal Gear NGO. When he'd snuck aboard the Big Shell facility, home of the terrorist organization Dead Cell, led by his second brother Solidus. Somewhere inside Snake, a voice spoke. Hasn't this been enough for one life? You've fulfilled your duty. You've fought more than enough battles. No one will fault you if you perish here. It's time for you to fade into the shadows of history, Solid Snake. But Snake wouldn't be able to forgive himself. If he died now, he'd die a captive of his own fate. Snake let out a deep roar from the bottom of his gut. He raised his operator to the sky and blindly fired until no bullets remained.
I'll show you, he shouted. I'll make it to the source of my destiny.
As the last vestiges of consciousness slipped away from Snake, the helicopter disappeared beyond the city. End of Act 1.